The woman sits alone, eyes fixed on the narrow path leading into the forest. 7 years have passed, but her heart still waits. The villagers told her to forget, to move on. The spirits had taken him, they said. The ancestors had closed their hands around his fate. But the nights are the hardest. The wind hums through the trees, whispering secrets she cannot understand. A growl breaks the silence. The village dogs, always calm at this hour, bare their teeth at the shadows. Their barks rise, sharp and frantic. Somewhere beyond the trees, the darkness shifts. Something is coming. A figure steps into the firelight, tall, silent, a man wrapped in night itself. The woman's breath catches in her throat. That face, she knows it, the sharp cheekbones, the scar along the brow. But the eyes, darker than she remembers, hollow like deep water that swallows light. A whisper escapes her lips. Obas? The villagers gather, drawn by the noise. Some murmur prayers, others clutch charms against their chests. A child gasps, an old woman spits on the ground. Impossible. He was taken. The forest does not return what it claims. The murmurs grow, wrapping around the fire like smoke. Some call it a blessing, others warn of a curse. A voice cuts through the whispers, firm and steady. The elder steps forward, his presence commanding. He studies the man before him, eyes sharp, searching for truth. Where have you been? Silence. The fire crackles, the wind sighs, the figure does not blink. Then at last the answer comes. Low, hollow, a voice not quite his own. I do not remember. The morning was clear, the sun rising over the hills, painting the world in soft golden hues. Obasi stood tall with his hunting spear, ready to leave. His laughter echoed across the village as he joined the group of men preparing for the hunt. He spoke of the big game they would catch, his voice full of excitement. Adia smiled at him, watching him disappear down the path, feeling the warmth of his presence as he left. But the village was quiet by nightfall, and Obas never returned. Days passed. The hunting party returned, weary and silent, but Obas was not with them. The men's faces were grim, their eyes downcast, and none spoke of what had happened. The search began almost immediately. The village elders called on the spirits for guidance. Diviners stood by the sacred tree, chanting in low, rhythmic voices. Hunters combed the forest, calling Obas's name. They found nothing, no tracks, no signs of struggle. It was as though the earth had swallowed him whole. Weeks turned into months. Adia, desperate, turned to the rituals of her people. She called upon the ancestors, asking them to bring back her husband. She offered sacrifices to the spirits, seeking answers. But every ritual, every prayer was met with silence. It was as if Obas had never existed at all. Seasons passed, and with each passing one, Adia's heart grew heavier, but her hope began to fade. The fire that once burned bright inside her slowly dimmed. The laughter that filled her home was replaced by an emptiness that stretched longer than the days. She wore her grief like a cloak, but even that began to fade. She started to rebuild her life, to move forward. The village accepted her back into its fold, though they all watched with sorrowful eyes. It was as though they had lost a daughter as well as a son. But still, life continued. Then, just as she had begun to find a new rhythm, a new normal, the wind carried a voice from the forest. Obasi returned, but he was not the same. The villagers whispered, unsure of what to believe. His face was thinner, his skin paler, and his eyes that once shone with life, were now dark and distant. He spoke in slow, careful words, as if each one took more effort than the last. His movements were stiff, and the warmth that had once radiated from him was gone. Something was wrong. The elders decided that Obas must be reintegrated into the village, but it was clear that they too had their doubts. He was their kin, their brother, their son, but he was a stranger wearing the skin of someone they once knew. Children who had once laughed with him now whispered behind their hands. His shadow moves when he stands still, one of them said, wide-eyed, her voice trembling with fear. The goats refused to graze near him, and the chickens scattered when he approached. Animals sensed what humans could not name. But the strangest change was in Bako, Obas's own brother. The two had always been close, working side by side in the fields, sharing meals and hunting together. But now, Bako would not look Obas in the eye. He averted his gaze whenever their paths crossed, his fear evident in the way his hands shook when he spoke. Adia watched all of this in silence, feeling the weight of something dark gathering around them. And then one night, it happened. She woke to the sound of a low murmur, The fire pit had died to a mere flicker, casting long shadows that danced on the walls of her hut. She rose from her mat, her feet silent on the ground. There, by the dying fire, stood Obas. His back was turned, and his voice, foreign and slow, carried in the still air. "I am waiting," he whispered. "The time is not yet." Adia's heart stopped. His voice was not his own. It sent a chill down her spine. She stood still, unsure whether to call his name or run. The fire crackled, but there was no warmth in it. She moved closer, watching him closely. His body swayed slightly, as if caught in a breeze no one could feel. But there was no wind. "Obas?" she finally whispered, her voice shaking. He did not respond. Instead, he continued speaking to the air, to the shadows that seemed to stretch unnaturally around him. His words were soft, too soft, and they did not make sense. It was as if he was speaking to someone or something unseen. Adia took a step back, fear creeping into her bones. The man standing before her was not the husband she had once known. This was a stranger wearing his face. The spear trembles in his grasp. His stance is wrong. The arrow looses too soon, missing the target by a wide stretch. Silence follows. The hunters exchange uneasy glances. Once, Obas was the finest among them. Now he cannot even hold a bow properly. A hand claps his shoulder. A voice, light with forced humor. "Perhaps the years have softened you." Laughter rises, but it is thin, uneasy. Obas does not laugh. He stares at the failed shot, his fingers flexing as though unfamiliar with their own strength. He mutters something, too low to hear, a name, a place, a whisper lost in the wind. The fire crackles, warm and inviting. The men sit in a circle, sharing old stories, the kind that stretch back generations, tales of trickster spirits, warrior ancestors, and the gods that shape the world. One voice rises, asking Obas to tell the story of the three brothers and the river spirit. He hesitates. His mouth opens, then closes. "I do not remember," he says at last, silence. How could he forget? The story every child knows? The men exchange glances, shifting uncomfortably. Someone chuckles, but it does not reach his eyes. "It has been long," he says. "Perhaps too long." Obas looks into the fire. The flames dance in his dark eyes. The boy's breath comes in short gasps. His small hands clutch his mother's wrapper, knuckles pale. His eyes, wide and fearful, dart toward the elders. "I saw him," he whispers. The men lean in. The fire flickers. "He walked into the forest." A murmur ripples through the crowd. Someone scoffs. "Many men walk into the forest, child." The boy shakes his head. "Not that part." His voice wavers. "The forbidden place." A hush falls over the gathering. No one, not even the hunters, treads near that part of the woods. The spirits there do not forgive trespassers. A hand rests on the boy's shoulder. "Are you sure?" The voice is gentle but firm. The boy swallows hard. "I saw him go in, and he did not come out." She watches him now. He sits alone, away from the fires, staring into nothing. He does not eat much. His hands do not idle with the work he once knew. His body is here, but his mind, sometimes when he thinks no one is near, he speaks under his breath. Not prayers, not words of this world. She listens. "A place between places. They are calling me back." Her blood runs cold. She cannot hold her tongue any longer. She stands before him, arms crossed, her voice sharp. "Who are you?" He does not answer. She steps closer. "You left me behind. You left all of us behind. And now you return, but you are not the same." Silence. She grips his wrist. "What happened to you?" His eyes lift to hers. They hold no warmth, only shadow. "I am not who you think I am." The elders whisper among themselves. The village watches. Elder Django steps forward, his voice heavy with decision. "The spirits must decide." Mama Udo is summoned. She is old, older than anyone can recall. The one who sees beyond the veil. She watches him, her wrinkled hands never still, tracing unseen symbols in the air. Her eyes, sharp despite the years, do not blink. At last she nods. "The fire will tell us." The villagers gather. The night air is thick with the scent of burning herbs. The sacred flame is lit, golden bright, until it is not. The fire turns blue. Gasps ripple through the crowd. Hands clutch charms. Some step back. Mama Udo stares, her face drawn tight with fear. Her voice shakes. This man is wearing another skin. The village does not sleep, not after those words. The elders press for answers. The night stretches long with murmurs and troubled glances. Then a voice, young, trembling. Akini, the youngest hunter. "I saw something," he says. All eyes turn to him. "That night, the night he disappeared." He swallows. "There is a place. A cave deep in the forest. We are told never to go near it. The elders nod. The warnings are ancient. Spirits dwell there. I saw him go inside, Ikini continues. He did not come out. His voice drops lower. But something else did. A shudder passes through the crowd. A question, unspoken, lingers in the air. If the real Obas was lost that night, then who is standing before them now? They gather as one. The old, the young, the hunters, the mothers clutching their children close. No one speaks. No one dares. Only the crackle of torches, the rustling of the wind through the trees. In the center, Mama Udo stands, her hands steady despite the weight of what she carries. The mirror, old as the village itself. The surface shimmers as if the air behind the glass does not belong to this world. The elders step forward. Their voices are solemn. The spirits do not lie. Obas's shoulders are rigid, his breath measured, but his hands tremble. He does not move. Mama Udo lifts the mirror higher. Come, he does not, a voice sharp and unwavering. If you are my husband, then show me. Adia, the words hit like a stone to the chest. The villagers murmur, a few steps closer, waiting, watching. Obas does not meet her eyes. She steps forward. Look into the mirror. Nothing. She grips his wrist, fingers digging into his skin. Look, a long breath. Slow, reluctant. He steps forward, one step, another. He stands before the mirror. He lifts his gaze. The reflection is not his own. Gasps cut through the night air. Someone stumbles back. A child wails, silenced quickly by a mother's hand. The thing in the mirror moves, but not as he moves. Its shape shifts, ripples, distorts. Shadows swirl where its face should be. The eyes, black, endless pits, stare back, unblinking, screams. A woman whispers a prayer. A man grips his charm, pressing it to his lips. The elders stare, faces pale as the moon. Adia does not move. The reflection shifts. Its voice is soft, almost mournful. I needed a body. The wind stirs, though no leaves move. He was lost. A hush falls. I took his place. The voice is not human. It is the rustling of dry leaves, the creaking of old wood, the whisper of something that does not belong. Adia's fingers curl into fists. She reaches for the sacred iron staff. The weapon of the old ways, the only thing spirits fear. Her grip tightens. The creature flinches. The villagers watch, frozen in fear. She lifts the staff. Her voice does not shake. Give him back. The creature wavers. Its form flickers, fighting to stay. The air around it distorts, heavy with something unseen. Adia steps closer. Give him back. The ground trembles. The torches flicker. The creature wails, a sound like wind tearing through hollow bones. The villagers cover their ears. Some fall to their knees. It writhes, convulses, its shadow stretching unnaturally against the ground. Something stirs within. A shape, a body. The creature screams, its voice cracking, its form crumbling like dried leaves in the wind. It collapses, and from within a man emerges, weak, barely breathing. Obas. Silence. The villagers do not move, do not speak. The creature lets out one final cry, then it is gone. A wisp of smoke, a breath of wind. Nothing remains. Obas's body is still. His breath is shallow. Adia falls to her knees beside him, her hands tremble as they touch his face. His skin is warm, his eyes flutter open. A long breath, a whisper. Adia? Tears slip down her cheeks, she closes her eyes. The night is quiet once more. He breathes, slow, shallow, but he breathes. The villagers watch from a distance as Adia kneels beside him. Her hands tremble as they press against his chest, as if feeling his warmth will confirm that he is real. Obas blinks. His lips part, but no words come. His eyes, once bright, once filled with laughter, hold only emptiness. Days pass. The village rejoices, but the celebration is hushed, uncertain. Obase walks among them, but he is not the same. His steps are slower. His hands tremble when he grips a cup, when he reaches for Adia's hand. He does not remember the years he was gone, only a vast, endless void. She tends to him, brings him water, helps him stand. At night, she watches him as he sleeps, searching for something, some sign that he is still the man she knew. But his laughter does not return. His voice, once rich and warm, is quiet, distant. She whispers his name in the dark. He does not answer. The question lingers. Why him? She turns it over in her mind, again and again. Of all the men in the hunting party, why did the creature choose Obas? Why did it wear his skin? The thought gnaws at her, a wound that will not close. Elder Django calls for a gathering. The fire crackles as the villagers sit in silence, waiting. His voice is heavy. The spirit world never takes without giving. He looks at Obas, then at Adia. A price was paid. The villagers murmur. A price. Adia's fingers tighten around the fabric of her dress. What was exchanged? No one answers. The fire spits embers into the night. The village watches him. Men who once called him brother now speak in hushed tones when he passes. Women clutch their charms tighter. The children do not run to him as they once did. And the animals? The goats refuse to graze near him. The dogs growl when he walks by. Even the crows, perched high in the trees, watch with eyes too knowing, too aware. That night the wind shifts. Adia stirs. A sound, a voice. She turns her head, heart pounding. Obas lies beside her, his breathing slow and steady, but his lips move, soft, muttering. She leans closer. The words are foreign, ancient, not his voice, not his tongue. Her skin prickles, her breath catches. The whispering stops, silence. Then a sigh, long and weary. I will return. Her blood runs cold. The village does not speak of it. Not openly. Not in the light of day. But in whispers, in glances cast over shoulders, in the way footsteps quicken near the forest's edge, the truth lingers. Some who are lost should never be found. The elders sit in silence, their faces lined with knowing. Elder Django's voice is low. The spirit world does not give without taking. The villagers nod, eyes heavy with understanding. No one asks what was taken. No one dares. Adia watches her husband. His hands, once strong, shake when he holds a cup. His laughter, once full, never returns. At times, she catches him staring at nothing, his expression hollow, his mind elsewhere. A stranger in a familiar body, a man returned, but never the same. She lies beside him at night, listens to his breathing, wonders what truly came back that night, and what was left behind. The village is quiet, the sky dark and endless. Then, a sound, a whisper, drifting from the trees, soft, distant, yet unmistakable. I will return. A shiver runs through the village. Children curl deeper beneath their blankets. Fires burn a little longer. Prayers are spoken. Some doors once opened are never truly closed.